My name is Connor Flanagan. I'm the Director of Education from the Southampton History Museum, and I'm joined here today by Treva Wurmfeld, who is the producer and director of the Conscience Point film, and also by Lance Gumbs, who is the vice chairman of the Shinnecock Indian Nation, who is featured heavily in the film. So I just want to remind everybody that's in here right now, if you have any questions, this is a Q&A. I brought some questions prepared that I'll be asking everybody, but if you have a question of your own, please feel free to submit them and we will answer everybody's questions. You can submit your questions either in the chat area or in the Q&A button. So on the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you're on your phone or your computer, there should be a button that says Q&A. You can click that button and you'll be able to submit questions live to us that we can answer for you. So hopefully people will get those to us soon. Like I said, I'm going to wait another minute or so. I'm going to send out a reminder email to everybody that's registered, so that way they can join. That's how these Zoom meetings always go. You always start it and then wait about 5 minutes to 10 minutes for everybody who's supposed to be there to be there. Okay. So also for everyone else that's here right now, I just want to remind you, all of our programs that we're doing, if you're interested in this or anything else, you can go to our website at southamptonhistory.org/calendar, and you can RSVP for any of our other upcoming programs and lectures. We've been doing all these live lectures pretty much every week, at least one or two of them since quarantine started. Thankfully, we got everything set up pretty quickly, so we've been able to keep everybody engaged. But we have a decent amount of people here at the beginning. So what we will do is we will get started with some of our questions, and people who join in, they'll join in. And hopefully once we have this recorded, we can put on YouTube. Anybody else has questions can submit them there and we can try and get some answers. First, we'll go with you, Treva. Let's see. So in case anybody wanted to watch this film who didn't get a chance, is there a way that people will be able to watch it in the future?
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Thanks for having me, and everyone on here, thank you for being here. Hope you're all staying safe and you're healthy and your families are healthy and everything. I know it's a crazy time. And thank you for watching the film too. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, or if you know somebody that would like to, our distributor, Women Make Movies, is currently releasing the film by DVD, which you can purchase an individual copy of for, I think, $19. You can request to stream it. They're not promoting that at this moment because they are pushing educational distribution first, and if it was available widely to stream, no one would purchase it for educational purposes. So which is how Women Make Movies makes a living. So their website, which I can post here in the chat, is a direct link to how you can access the film. And like I said, it's streaming, they have DVDs, and if you're a professor or know faculty that are interested, they can purchase an educational license. And so that's where the film is right now. In the future, probably closer to the end of 2020, the film will become more widely available. We are not sure at this point what exact platforms, but it should be available, like at least on iTunes, if not a Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that. So
that's great.
Yeah.
And for you, Lance, I just wanted to check in about how is everything going on the reservation today, with all the concerns going on about COVID. How are things being handled there? Are you directly involved with any of the aid or support that's going on?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's an interesting times that we're living in right now. We in the community of Shinnecock have sort of isolated ourselves in order to protect our national treasure, which is our elders. We have a great number of elders who are in their 80s, 90s, and we just had our oldest member turn 103 yesterday, Mr. Lubin Hunter. So, you know, one of our big goals was to try and protect our elders who, as I said, are a national treasure. They hold our history. We get all of our knowledge and understanding of who we are as, you know, traditional Shinnecock people from them. And so with that being said, we implemented a number of measures in the community. First thing we did was to create a food distribution tent. It's called the Shinnecock Food Distribution, and we serve food 5 days a week to all of our tribal members, those who have lost their jobs and lost their income from the virus, and then those who we were trying to prevent from actually leaving the community and going downtown and mingling and potentially bringing the virus back. So it had a twofold process. We shut down all of our tribal roads on the weekends to any outsiders coming in. And then I was very pushy with the federal government in getting the nation a Abbott ID Now test analyzer for our health center. So right from the beginning, we were able to start testing our people with the 15-minute test. We also have the antibody test up here. And those few things, I think, have gone a long way in helping to prevent it from coming into the community. We just received our share of the $8 billion that was set aside for Indian country as a whole for the 574 federally recognized tribes. We received our share of that to help to put in place any measures of protection or any of the necessary funding for our workers or anyone to again, you know, try to isolate ourselves and keep it out of our community. We took a page out of our history book. You know, 350 some odd years ago, there was the smallpox that was given to Native communities, and that smallpox went through our communities and it was devastating. So we actually took a page out of our history from that time period with the isolation. Shinnecock was one of those tribes that wasn't really affected by it, even though a lot of our sister tribes were, especially the ones up in New England that were affected by the smallpox. But what we did was isolate ourselves then, and you know, we took a page out of history and did the same thing now and isolated ourselves. So we're moving along, and hopefully we'll be able to keep it out of our community.
That's great. You're doing a lot of great work over there, which is fantastic. So moving on to talking about the film itself, were there any kind of challenges that presented themselves while you were making this documentary?
Yeah, so the film began in 2014 when I first met Rebecca Genia, who is, you know, one of the central characters in the film, if you haven't seen it. And for the first year or so, I was actually focused on the issues of violence against women. So, I mean, the focus completely shifted while I was making this film and learning about the community through Becky's experience. And it wasn't until I went to town hall with her and saw her protest in front of the town board there, an issue over land preservation initially, that I realized that this is a topic for her that goes back decades, and she's been focused on protesting and for a long time. And I realized that Charles Certain, who's a co-producer on the film and also happens to be the town videographer, films, all of the town hall meetings, that there was this like incredible trove of material of Becky and other Shinnecock members, Lance included, going to town hall and speaking their minds and saying, hey, you know, we not only care about this land, you know, and want to preserve it, but also, you know, our ancestors' graves are being desecrated, you know, left and right, all over the Shinnecock Hills. And so when I started to wake up to that reality and see that there was this archival material to support it, I realized that was something I was very interested in. And to be honest, you know, as much as I think worthy of a film, violence against women is a very hard topic to document because it's all after the fact. And so I was struggling there. So that was the first challenge. The very first challenge was just like, okay, what is the topic of this film? And then, I mean, as you see, if you've watched the film, it really weaves together a number of issues in the community, whether it's environmental issues or economic development issues or, you know, issues of historic oppression and discrimination. So I think, you know, the challenges that any filmmaker faces, honestly, is, you know, how to weave these important topics and just, you know, how to make it so that it all flows like with a beginning, middle, and end, you know, and that was something that we faced more in post-production, but it was honestly something that I had to think about during production as well, because it was, you know, who do I film, who do I interview, what are the topics here that are going to really bring the important issues to the surface and you know, create dialogue, which I think is the primary intent of the film.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like the biggest change or struggle was just getting the right topic, getting there with one idea and finding out what was going on and just pivoting.
Yeah, it was not access, as you think. It wasn't access. I mean, Becky was very open. Anyone I approached to interview was generally open to be interviewed. And so I didn't struggle there at all. And I appreciate that.
You always wonder that with documentaries, at least I always do, of just like, how did you get this person to agree to this? But yeah, many times.
Though, I will say people are key to that being easy, though. I mean, it wasn't just me. Like Charlie, the co-producer, connected me with Lance. If I hadn't, you know, brought Charlie on the team, I don't know that I would have gotten an interview with Lance as easily as I did. So, I mean, I think that it's often important who you bring onto your team.
Great.
So, yeah.
And so in speaking about the film and all the connections and people that have been in it, Lance, have you noticed any sort of particular backlash or anything that's happened from the film or anything positive that's really come out of the film?
I think there was a lot more positive than negativity. Obviously, you know, we had the incident down in Sag Harbor with the one individual, but other than that, I think that genuinely, people didn't know some of the issues that we're facing or that we have been facing. You know, I always often say that we're sort of the forgotten people out here on the East End. You know, people ride by, they see a sign that says Shinnecock, but they don't really know about us. They don't, you know the history, the longevity that we've had here in this town, and they don't understand some of the issues that face us, being a tribe surrounded by all this wealth and opulence. So, you know, for us, I think it was a story, one that needed to be told, and, you know, we were extremely pleased with the way that Treva portrayed the tribe and brought forth some of our issues, especially the graves protection, our land desecration, you know, right on up to, you know, a little bit about even the, you know, the sign project. So I think that for us, it was finally the ability to hear our story, and not be someone else's story. It came directly from us. It's what we've lived, it's what we've been through. And it was, I think, a defining moment, for our community, for once being able to be heard here in the Hamptons.
Yeah. And so in line with everything about the film, or anything you're mentioning before, somebody asked a live question when you're talking about the food pantry and stuff that you're working with, if you could provide an address or location if people are able to donate and assist in any way. Do you have an address that people could donate questions to?
We are working on that. It's usually just easiest to call the tribal office, and that number is 631-283-6143. And that's the easiest way to reach us. My food tent happens to be smack dead in the middle of the territory in front of our administration building. And we've been out there in the wind, the rain, the hail, and now the sun. But we have been taking donations from, and I think that's, one of the great things about, out here as well, because we've gotten a lot of donations from people, which has been able to keep the food pantry going. And we've serviced a lot of people. I mean, we do on average probably 200 to 300 meals a day.
Wow.
And and that's on a light day. So it's been interesting too, to be down there, and I'm there every day from 9:30 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon. And it's just something, that we felt strongly about as the leadership of the nation, and trying to, help our people. And, the support that we've received from the outside has also been tremendous.
It's fantastic.
Lance, just to confirm, because I wrote it in the Q&A, it's 631-283-6143.
Yes, and that's our switchboard. You can leave a message there because our offices are still closed right now. We did put everybody at home working, from home. So, but we check that every day. So that's the easiest way to reach us right now.
To receive donations.
Yes.
Perfect. So also now, before we get talking about the content of the film and everything like that, so Treva, you mentioned that you started working on the film in 2014. How did you come to start working on the film, specifically about the Shinnecocks here in Southampton? Did you grow up out here? Did you just happen upon this area?
I grew up in New York City, and my parents were teachers and artists, and they rented a place in Hampton Waters, which is out by 3 Mile Harbor, in 1980. I was 2. And I remember we went there maybe 2 summers for like a week or 2. Honestly, we did not spend a lot of time in the Hamptons. But growing up in the city, you know endless people who do. And so, I mean, it was definitely a place I visited. And I can't say that I can't say that I knew much about the Shinnecock Nation or any of the issues of the Hamptons before I started making this film, to be honest. It really was something that emerged while I was making it. And I do feel a strong connection to the environment. Even though we didn't spend a ton of time out there, I would say that that kind of coastal New England environment is very much a part of my life, even now. And so I care deeply about it. And, as I was filming and discovering that there was water quality issues and, all the issues that started to emerge, they did, ring alarm bells for me. It was not it wasn't totally disconnected from my life. You know, I think it's something that we all, whether you live in the Hamptons or not, I think we all can sort of relate to these issues these days.
Yeah, it sort of seems you always are a little bit blind to stuff until you start asking questions and you find out. I find that all the time at work myself, working at the Southampton History Museum. You start looking into something and then suddenly fall down a rabbit hole of finding out all sorts of different crazy things.
I mean, I would say the things that can kind of that relate to me specifically, that you know, drove my interest are, you know, in many ways the focus on a female subject and a female activist in particular, and you know, it's sort of a naive statement, but I would say I'm generally interested in Native American studies. So, you know, it's sort of something that has always been there, even since I was very little, that you know, I've been interested in who was here first. So, you know, it's sort of a simple thing and easy enough to say now, but I would say that was really, like, I felt like I could make this film. Something inside me told me that.
So now getting into some of the topics that were highlighted in the film. One of the key locations that's spoken about was a property that was purchased by somebody named Constantine, and while they were working on there, they discovered what was human remains. And so what happened with that property for anybody who hasn't seen the film? Lance or Trevor, whoever wants to speak on that.
I think Lance maybe is better to speak on it.
Well, when those remains were found, you know, luckily, it was an individual who knew people from the community, knew Becky, you know. Rebecca, who's in the film, I just want to, you know, give her a plug, because she's been one of our woman warriors, you know, it seems like forever. From back in the American Indian movement, back in the 70s, to now, you know, she has always been on the forefront of the issues that pertain to Indian country, as we call it, and especially locally here in the Hamptons. So the gentleman, actually, the builder who was doing the construction, actually knew Becky, and brought to her attention that while he was excavating, literally had dug his excavator down, and the human skull rolled out. And so he contacted the tribe on it. And from there, we went over there to, obviously, one, to give prayers, because we knew it was someone, you know, that had been a part of our ancestral community. And that whole area, you know, which is something, you know, in terms of history here on Long Island, but history for Indian country as a whole, is part of a major historical process there. Most people know the Sioux tribe, and you know, with the Sioux, most have always heard about the Black Hills in the Dakotas and how sacred the Black Hills were to the Sioux people. Well, it was the same thing with us. You know, the Shinnecock Hills was our sacred area. It was our burial grounds. It was the highest point in our area here. And so when this happened, we knew, without having to be told by anyone, you know, the medical examiner or anyone else, we knew that it was one of ours. And so, you know, the first thing that was done was a ceremony was done to pray for that individual. But then the process started, you know, of trying to acquire that land as one of the burial grounds in the hills. And that led to a number of things, which ended up finally with the CPF, the Community Preservation Fund, and the Shinnecock Nation joining in to purchase the actual property to preserve it into the future. And so that process is ongoing now. The property has been purchased. It is being preserved, and now comes, the remaining part of just, I guess, fixing it up, if you would say that, so that one of the things that we wanted was for it to return to sort of its natural state, but there will be an area over there marking the site. But the back and forth that we went through actually, gave us some insight into how to move forward with this into the future as well with the Community Preservation Fund. And since that time, there's been a panel that's been created of Shinnecock people who sit on the board to oversee the sites, especially in Shinnecock Hills. It was very disturbing to us because that area was designated as a sensitive site on all of the maps. So it shouldn't have been, messed with, or permits shouldn't have been given in the first place. There is a whole map that designates all of the sensitive sites in the hills, and that happened to be one of them. And, look what happened, It was, a permit was given, and they went in and dug, and these remains were found. So we then repatriated the remains in an additional ceremony, and giving back to our ancestor his proper burial.
Yeah, I believe I was at the museum. We had a copy of that map that highlights all those sites. And I was actually the one that drove the copy that we had to give it to Shane Weeks to get a copy made, so that way there could be more copies of it available. Because I believe my director was helpful in getting sort of that original map laid out about 10 or so years ago. And thankfully we still have that copy, all the sticky notes still on it with all the notations.
And that was very helpful because we had given one to the town and that mysteriously disappeared, like a number of other things when it comes to land transactions or some of the other historical, like the fort that's up in the hills, the old fort, that's been carbon dated back about 10,000 years. So when you look at all of these things, we're just happy that there was an actual another copy of that floating around, and we were able to take that and utilize that as this process moves forward. And I think that we're in the process of working out the logistics with the town on some of these sensitive sites, and having the town and the Community Preservation Fund purchase those sites. And I think that that will go a long way in building a bridge as well, because it, unlike what seems to be, other groups, we value our ancestors and we value the stories that, that they've been able to tell. And it's important for us, that they are left in peace.
So for sites like this and maybe some others that, like you were mentioning, hopefully you can be purchased with these CPF funds. Are the plans for most of those to be sort of return to their natural look and just sort of almost be like public parks where people could go and just sort of enjoy nature? Or are there sort of other plans or ideas?
I mean, well, that is our hope, that they will just be left, untouched and left to, to grow and to really be what they're supposed to be. We are stewards of the land, and it's kind of ironic to us sometimes when we listen to people talk about the things that they think we're going to do or what we want to do. Everything that we do has some meaning or value in the whether it's the land or the water, or our people, and the historical content of our people. We are that steward, and we maintain a sort of preservation mentality that it should be just left as it is.
Yeah, we want to return it back to looking natural, like it was, which is very funny how in the film, Trevor, you point out how all the rich people from New York City in the late 1800s came out to Southampton, inspired by Walt Whitman, to sort of enjoy the nature of the area, and then how things changed, and it got built up, and then now we're trying to preserve and sort of get some of these areas looking back to their natural, beautiful state.
Yeah, I have to give credit to Corey Dolgan, the sociologist in the film, who wrote an amazing book called The End of the Hamptons. And in that book, he really unfolds the various eras of people moving out and sort of critiquing anyone that moved out after them as causing the quote unquote end of the Hamptons. And, you know, I think it is rather ironic. There's so many layers of irony, to be honest. It's
a nice onion of irony out here.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, his book is incredible, and it points out not only, you know, the people moving out, but once there became this year-round group of non-native folks, of you know, all of the ways that ended up ultimately creating, you know, a class struggle in the area, you know, because the demands of people were more or less the demands of what their lifestyles would have been like in New York City or anywhere else they moved out there from. So, yeah, lots to dig into there.
Oh yeah. Now, Lance, you mentioned that there was a sort of a committee formed involving the Southampton town and the Shinnecocks to sort of coordinate over a lot of these sites that maybe were of significance that need to be protected, correct?
Yes, there's 3 members of the nation that we have appointed to be on this board, and they will sit with the community preservation fund managers and look at the different parcels of land and see how they can be preserved. If the landowner is interested in selling to the preservation fund, and they've identified a number of pieces of property right now that they're looking at to try to preserve. One of the other things that we're doing too is we're pushing with Assemblyman Fred Thiel the Graves Protection Act that we're trying to move through New York State. New York State is one of only 4 states in the entire country that doesn't have a Graves Protection Act. And it's really amazing that, you know, New York being one of the original, 13 colonies, doesn't have something in place like that to protect the historical, grave sites. And it's not just ours. I mean, they don't have it, period, for anyone. And that's just kind of amazing to me that has never been looked at. But especially it's magnified out here in the Hamptons because of, the land grabs and, the way that the land was, and I'm going to say stolen from us, especially the 3,800 acres between the canal and Tucker Hole Road here, which is right by our community, which encompasses the Southampton College, Southampton Golf Course, the National Golf Course, and Shinnecock Hills. That land was flat out stolen from us in 1859 in violation of the Intercourse Act, which is in the film. And we, are looking at least trying to preserve some of that land in here through these land purchases with the Community Preservation Fund.
Yeah, I was very surprised to learn that New York State doesn't have any sort of Grave Protection Act or thing like that for private properties, where when things like this occur, there's no law in the books. So I'm glad to hear that you're working with Fred Thiel and trying to get those things pushed forward.
Well, that was a concern to us because we are aware of a number of properties where bones were dug up and just thrown in the dumpster, and anywhere else that would be a crime. But here, it wasn't a crime because there's no laws on the books. And even NAGPRA, which is the Indian version of it, doesn't pertain to, as you just said, private land. So that is something that we're trying to get changed And most recently in the town with the town board sort of implementing a moratorium on any of the building projects out here right now while this process moves forward. And the town is also in the process of trying to put something in place to protect these grave sites, especially in the sensitive site area here in the hills, which would, notify the nation. We would then have someone out there to monitor the digs if if this went forward. So there's a number of things on both levels, both the local level and the state level, that we're working on to try to change those dynamics.
Yeah, and for anybody that's not aware what NAGPRA is, it's the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which helps when there's anything on federal land or like museum archives or things like that. But as Lance was talking about, it does nothing for private property. So it's up to the states. So the fact that New York State has as many Native American tribes within it as it does, and it doesn't have anything to help in these regards is crazy. So hopefully, again, with your help, you can get something like that done, which will help not only yourself, but every other nation or tribe within New York State, which is really fantastic.
The NAGPRA did work a little bit, though, for us in terms of getting back some of our remains. We got back over 130 remains from the various museums and the Smithsonian, the National Museum in New York City, and a couple of museums out here on the island, which we then repatriated in private burial ceremonies for them, as close to the areas that they had come from, which was really important, because that's one of the things that was really disturbing us. But we were able to at least do that, in the interim here while we wait on the legislation to come on both levels.
Yeah. One of the other big points of the film that you get into is talking about the Shinnecock Gaming Center. So in the film, Jay Schneiderman says basically along the lines that the Shinnecocks could be millionaires, and that the town wouldn't step in their way or prevent them from doing anything as long as what they do helps the community. And then it cuts very quickly to talking about the game center. So if you could talk about a little bit about what happened with the game center, why there isn't one, and everything about that.
Well, I think there's a misconception. First of all, it was never done for us to be millionaires, for the individuals in the community to be millionaires. We're a community, and that for the gaming, and I won't say past tense because it is coming. Is something that is for the community, and will go to fund, our community programs, our social programs, and especially to help out with our housing and some of the substandard housing that people are still living in, here in our community. Just to break away from that for a second, most people have heard about the Navajo and the situation that is going on out there and how the virus has attacked the Navajo Nation, which spans 4 states, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. But one of the big problems that they were having is the homes that didn't have any water in them. They don't have water so they could wash their hands and some of these things. And so, bring that back. I was on a Zoom call just like this with the president of Navajo Nation a while back, probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were discussing that very issue. But here we are in the Hamptons where we have some very similar circumstances to that in our community as well. So when we're looking at, what the gaming revenue and these things would have gone for, it would have been just to bring us up to a standard of living that's equivalent, not to our rich neighbors, but just to the normal standard of living here in our community. In the 2010 census, we were 60% below the poverty level. That's unacceptable for me as a tribal leader and for any of my other board members that are on my council. So all of these things that we're doing in terms of economic development is designed to bring funds into the community as a whole, not to make an individual rich, but to enrich our community. And so with the gaming was actually something else. It had another meaning to it. And there's a real misconception that the town and the state stopped us, and that's absolutely not true. We stopped ourselves from moving forward with the gaming at that particular time. The town and the state, if you go back and look at the record, the actual record was vacated. The decision against the tribe was actually vacated in the appeals court. So, there's a misnomer there that the tribe stopped that. I mean, that the town and the state stopped it. Our goal is to do something, and we will be moving forward with gaming. It's just a question of where. And we were negotiating those things with, the town and not the town so much, but the state. But we looked at the circumstances behind it, and it was just not the right time for us at that time. But it is something that we are going to move forward with eventually.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing however that develops in the future. And then, Treva, you mentioned before talking about it being not so difficult getting people to be in the film and film at certain places. One place in particular, I imagine, might have been a little difficult, or maybe wasn't, at the U.S. Open on the Shinnecock Hills golf course. How did you get in there?
Well, Lance very generously gave me a ticket to go when I was filming with him. So that was one way, but I did need to get a press pass, and I did need to explain to them what I was doing. So there was a little bit of jumping through that hoop. But, I think this film had the benefit, you could say, of taking place in the Hamptons. And, if you, as I was filming, and especially after that initial pivot, as we were talking about, I was able to say I was making a film about the history of the Hamptons, which was totally true, without really going into the details. And so, and I honestly didn't really know exactly how everything would come out. I mean, I knew what side I was on, but I didn't know how it would all take shape. So, yeah, I mean, I was able to get a press pass, and that was really nice.
Yeah.
They treat the press well at the U.S. Open.
Well, that's good to hear.
They have a whole food tent.
One of the parts in the film where, I mean, the film itself is very serious and very historical and somewhat of a somber tone at times. But one of the parts in the film that makes me laugh every single time I see it, and I've seen the film about 3 or 4 times now, is while you're there at the Open, and Lance says to somebody, "Yeah, that's the real logo, not that fake one," talking about the crest that I believe you see on his shirt right now. Which, just that line itself, great comedic timing, Lance.
It makes me laugh every time too. And I will say, I can't tell you how shocking, it's probably not shocking to the Shinnecock, but shocking to me to see the use of that logo, just, with no scruples, no question. I still just can't believe it. And I also honestly can't believe that the town hall has a colonial pilgrim on its, shield, on the seal. The seal on the podium that everyone has to stand in front of it. And I mean, it's the sort of symbol. It's on all the symbolism is quite shocking to me. It seems very outdated and obviously very inconsiderate. Not to mention all the preservation of colonial land without much consideration for the Shinnecock. So perhaps that's a sensitive topic within the History Museum, but I mean, I feel like it's part of the film, so I'm not saying anything you haven't heard.
Yeah, no, that was my leading question was to ask Lance. Basically, the thoughts and feelings behind the fact that there's really no compensation from the golf course to the tribe for the use of the name or the logo or anything like that, and the fact that members aren't even allowed onto the course. I mean, even to become a member, it's private, so you have to be invited. And I can't imagine. I mean, maybe there's some Shinnecock people that are members, but I'm not sure if there are.
No, there's not. We're not in that income bracket
Yeah.
to be members of the chorus. And that is one of the things that disturbs a lot of us in the community. And it wouldn't even be so bad if we were able to at least, go up there once in a while, and be able to play. But to have the band that's, on the tribe, or tribal members who play golf, to me is unacceptable. And, again, you look at the history of the golf course, which was built over grave sites up there. And, that's one of the things that I talked about in the film, with my grandmother going up there and talking about getting that land back. It's really disheartening to us that the cores or the membership would put those kind of stipulations on there. We're all golfers in our community here. I mean, we grew up playing golf. One of our members, Shippen, was played in the second U.S. Open. So we have a long history with the golf course. Our members built the golf course. And that's how we know factually that it was built over several grave sites there. And that's been passed down, through our oral history, which is extremely important to us. My grandmother was born in 1889. The golf course, I believe, was built in 1898, somewhere in that time period. So, she was old enough to see it and listen to her father coming home and talking about it, listening to, her mother. And the history of that golf course is a stinging reminder to us that here is something that's right there, and goes to your point about the use of the name. And then, to have an Indian head on there, which the Indian head is, for us, it's one of those reminders that, it's sort of like the mascot, like we're having with the Washington Redskins issue right now. That's a phony headdress. It's a fake Indian up there. So when the gentleman said that to me, I was just reacting to his comments, about the logo, and he was looking at ours. And if you look at our logo and our seal and the flag that's in the background, it depicts our history. It has our housing in it. It has the wampum that we made, and the first form of money that was here on the East End. It has the whales. We were whalers. So our whole seal itself depicts our lifestyle. It talks about our food in there. And it means something. It means something to us, versus, the symbol that they have at the golf course, which, is to us a racist joke. And, we look at it and we're like, wow, they continue to put these Indian heads, or whether it's, the Cleveland Cavaliers, or the Cleveland Indians, or whether it's the Atlanta Braves with the tomahawk chop and all of these things. You wouldn't have a team named the Kansas City Jews, or the Arizona Chinks, or any of these other derogatory names that come into play. But to have, I'm actually in a soundbite about the Washington Redskins, and it talks about all of the things we are, but the one thing we're not is a mascot. And that's done. I'm also the vice president for the National Congress of American Indian, and we have been running a very large campaign nationwide on those type of issues. So to your point, it's really disheartening to us and a slap in the face to us. One, that, we're not able to get any sort of a tea time up there, just as an acknowledgement, that yes, this is your land. We built it over the bodies of your humans, of your ancestors, and it's one of those sore points with us that will continue until we move forward with some of our other ideas.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the mascot issue. as I went to college in Chicago, and the Blackhawks were kind of all the rage when I was there. I think they had just won the Stanley Cup while I was there. And that was my thinking was maybe if you could at least play the game, you could maybe take some ownership or some interest in it, where I'm sure there's local Native Americans in the Chicago area who aren't happy with the Blackhawks logo, but maybe if they at least like the sport, there's some ownership you can take over there. But the fact that you're not even allowed to play the game or visit the course or anything like that is, I mean, just an added sort of disrespectful thing that is really crazy to me, even just trying to wrap my head around it.
It's sort of a multi-layered, because you have, obviously, it's all built on stolen land that should be returned or you know, some sort of compensation at the very least. And then on top of that, you're playing golf. And it's like,
yeah.
I mean, it kind of, and selling, you know, many millions of dollars worth of merchandise with the logo on it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they maybe have that name trademarked, which is crazy.
I think some.
You know, that was one of the things, you know, with them not even allowing Shinnecock to participate in any of the revenue stream from the U.S. Open. And, you know, obviously, our people were out there protesting that, you know, very situation because, you know, here you're using, you know, number one, you're using our land, you're using our name, you're sending this, you know, out to the world, and yet there was no inclusion until the very last minute, and that's only because, you know, we stomped our foot again, and it's sort of the same thing that happened with the last U.S. Open here. However, during that one, we were able to receive a revenue stream by having some of the concession tents located on our territory, which helped, you know, the nation a great deal. But this year, you know, for last year's, well, actually 2 years now, we were left completely out of the loop in any discussions, even from everything from shutting down the roads, you know, and how the roads were going to go. It was as if we didn't exist, you know, and that was unacceptable on any level for us. And we made that quite clear to the town, the state, the USGA. So the USGA actually came back, and they actually have built up a small little golf facility up here, which we'll be dedicating sometime this summer. They built it in our community here. But, you know, again, you know, these are the type of things that having open lines of communication would sort of ease the tension. But when you just ignore us, you know, that's not going to happen. Them days are over. You know, as Trevor said earlier, you know, the history of the Hamptons, we are the history of the Hamptons. Make no mistake about that. You know, the Hamptons is built around us, and we are the history. And we will not let our history in any way, shape, or form be forgotten. And, you know, back in the days when, you know, we had to work in the community to survive, and there was a measure of control from that, we had to sit back and take it. But those days are over. You know, we're looking for a government-to-government relationship with the town of Southampton, which I think that we're well on our way to achieving. We're looking for that same relationship status with the state, and we already have it with the federal government. Once we became a federally recognized tribe, it's automatic. So those are the kind of things that, you know, we're looking to do, to have open dialogue and, you know, to include us now in the community, which hasn't happened in the past.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're probably already aware, but the the U.S. Open is scheduled to come back to Southampton in 2026. So
we're well aware of it.
I figured as much. So
we're laying in wait.
we were joking beforehand about a part 2 of this documentary. I don't know, maybe 6 years from now might be a good time to get an idea in there about part 2.
I think it's kind of the relationship with the golf course is something that people fall on different sides of within the Shinnecock Nation, as far as I can tell, because I think there's some people that feel like, you know, who have, I mean, I can't really speak for Becky, but I don't know that Becky cares about one iota about the golf course per se maintaining its status as a golf course. She sees it as
No, she doesn't.
Yeah. So
She
I think,
doesn't.
yeah, I think it's just an interesting, it's an interesting dilemma because of the potential economic benefit. The U.S. Open is a huge moneymaker for the town. Hasn't been for the nation, but it could be. So it's quite complicated. And I honestly, I would love a part 2 of this film, but I don't know exactly, what the best case scenario outcome would be for the nation there, because I think different tribal members feel differently about it.
No, I think that we all feel the
I don't know
same
if
way
that's it.
about it in terms of what we would like to see. Like, would we like to see it, put back to its natural state? I think everybody in our community feels that way, including, in line with Becky's thoughts on that. However, from a realistic standpoint, we also have to be realistic.
Right.
And, realistically, there has to be a bridge there, some kind of way, because we know that it's not going to happen. It's not going to be changed back into a nice forest out there, and the deer and the antelope running through it. So now what do we do now in place of that? So we have to bridge that gap some kind of way, and I think that's where the potential is to move forward in that type of a direction. We're not going to get it back. We know that. And even when we went with our land claim, which, we're going to be bringing that back up, because our land claim is real. The land was stolen from us in 1859. There's no question. And even though there is precedent in the Supreme Court now, that doesn't mean that we can't get the repatriations for it. That doesn't mean that we can't get the value of this land, whether it's from the state, the town, the county, whomever. That option is still on the table for us, to go after. And, obviously, a lot of real estate brokers, because I know in looking at some of the real estate contracts, there was a provision in there that talked about, if the Indians come after their land, we're not responsible. And we know for a fact that, from Tuckahoe Road over here to the canal, there is no real deeds. They're all phony. They're all made up. So when we look at it from the historical content to now, how can we all get along? How can we bridge that gap where that is acknowledged? We know we're not getting the land back, but there is going to be some kind of repatriations for this land. We will never let that part of it go.
Well, hopefully now with the new relationship that's developed since this film with the repatriation group, where people from the Shinnecock Nation are in talks, people from the town working together on projects. Hopefully, as time goes on, there can be more of a bridge built, and progress can get made. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
Well, that's what I think what we're looking for, as the realization starts to set in, even, just most recently as last week with, the state court judge's decision, acknowledging the fact that if you read his decision, he really did his homework. He went back into the colonial era. He talked about the transactions. He talked about the law that was prevalent at that time and how different it was from even the law that was right in Manhattan, and how that law came from the Netherlands and was really like modern day law that we have today versus the law that was here in Long Island, in the Hamptons here in this area, that came down from New England, and the differences between that, and how that law didn't even allow for lawyers or for the nation to step forward and participate in any kind of real hearings on our land. And that's one of the things where, we're looking at this from not only the historical content of it, but where we are today. We're running out of land here in our community. Where our community, with our people moving back and the birth rates and everything, we're running out of land here. So there is going to be a need for us to acquire additional lands. And that 3,600 acres that goes from Tuckahoe Road to the canal was very much a part of that. So, the repatriations of that in terms of the funds for it, would go a long way in helping us to maybe acquire lands in a different area, that we could incorporate into the tribe. I mean, if you go out west to some of the tribes, especially like Crow, I use them as an example all the time. Because they have districts, and they have different districts within their Crow reservation, and that's sort of something that we've been looking at and studying to see how that might work for us, where we would be able to acquire different lands and incorporate that back into the territory under the auspices of the nation.
Yeah, well, this has all been fantastic, and I'm very happy that the two of you agreed to come here, have these conversations. We've reached an hour, so I feel like this is a pretty good stopping point, unless anybody else from the audience has any other questions. I know a few people had questions they submitted over as we were talking, that Treva was answering for them. There was one person saying that they remember Phil Brown welcoming them in nursery school and telling them about his life on the reservation, and it's a close connection for them. So
that's either my brother or my nephew, one of the two.
But if nobody else has any questions, again, we want to thank you all for joining us. Here at the Southampton History Museum, we have plenty more programs going on. Make sure to check our website, southamptonhistory.org/calendar. You can see all of our upcoming events and lectures. If you want to make a donation to the Shinnecock Reservation, you can call the number that Lance provided at the beginning, which is 631-283-6143. And hopefully be on the lookout for more films from Treva in the future. And if you want to purchase this film, as you mentioned before, if you contact Women Makes Movies or Women Making Movies?
It's just women make
Women Make
movies.
Yes, contact them on their website, wmm.com. You'll be able to either buy a DVD, or you could, as she was suggesting, you could talk to them about getting streaming available.
I just want to say one thing along those lines. We are doing a big educational sales push right now, and this film, if you've seen it, is relevant to, obviously Native American studies, women's studies, environmental studies, even law when it comes to the land rights issues, anthropology, sociology. So if you know any faculty that work in those fields and would be interested, please direct them to the website I posted in the chat, and they'll be able to purchase an educational license for, through their university library or school library, or individually for their class. Because of the virtual distant learning that's happening now, Women Make Movies has set up a way for them to rent, similar to this, what we've done through the museum, where you rent for a period of time, and it allows all their students to watch it. And we're also available for Q&As as well. So please help spread the word as much as you can, especially within the educational network out there.
I'll say I've already forwarded the information to my former professors in college. Actually, the first museum I worked at was at my college, which was a Native American art museum, the Shinnecock Art Center in Aurora, Illinois. So hopefully they'll be purchasing the film soon to show one of their classes. So again, this has been fantastic, and I want to thank you guys both for your time and for making this film and providing this great information for everybody.
Thank you so much, Connor. Thank you,
Thank
Lance.
you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.